well, all juniors in our theater department have to write a play as part of the curriculum. And we're best friends. We've been best friends since like kindergarten. And we work really well together, and we get our best ideas when we're bouncing off of each other. And we both really love Shakespeare. Like, we've studied the text a lot. We did Romeo and Juliet in the fall. And we wanted a way to integrate him somehow without it turning into a kind of Shakespeare abridged ripoff. So...
A Shakespeare what?
Abridged.
Okay.
Yeah. And so we kind of bounced around with a lot of ideas for a little bit. And it took us like three times writing it through before we finally came through with the right character. We had to switch the characters around, and do we want Shakespeare to be the main character or Gabriella to be the main character? And it took us a while, but our own frustrations with writing it kind of came through as Gabriella was having problems writing her play. And that's kind of what inspired that struggle, because that's what we were going through, and we knew exactly what it felt like and how frustrating it was. Anything to add?
Nailed it.
Okay.
I thought it was a really fun and funny premise. I really liked the Shakespeare sort of relationships. I thought they were really interesting and ridiculous adaptations of these various plays. The Maury Shakespeare mashup on page 13 I wrote was a lot of fun, and the banter about the word with Julia, and the fact of Julia being underage, I thought was also really funny. And I also highlighted the juxtaposition, the hilarious juxtaposition of the banquet scene, and the childish antics. I thought was just a lot of fun. In general, my general note would be that the dialogue and situations were just very entertaining and a lot of fun.
Yeah, I did too. I had a good time with, I thought it was fun and high energy, and I thought that the perspectives on the Shakespeare scenes were fun and a great sort of quirky perspective on those.
Yeah, I agree. It would be a lot of fun. Same thing, very clever idea. The updated Shakespeare scenes I put especially were enjoyable. And also I enjoyed that it was sort of about, that you came around to that it was sort of about how do you define your own voice or be true to yourself. Like you said, that was your struggle while you were writing, and I think that's really interesting because that's a great question, especially with all the things we've seen today, and we see a bunch of movies, and how do you do your own original idea and be true to what you need to write. So I think that's a great thing that's original to this play and you guys. Because we've seen Shakespeare mashups before, like you said.
Yeah.
And yours were funny. So I actually enjoyed those like the most in the play. Because they were very theatrical. But you had something more to say with the play. And you sort of discovered that. So I thought that was great.
I wondered about, I felt like I was missing a sense of what these characters want. So it feels like we discover that by the end, and sometimes that's the writing process for us. Like we have to write the full draft before we go, oh, the play's about this.
Yeah.
So finding a way for that to be the same problem at the beginning. Here's the problem. Gabrielle wants this. Ultimately she has these obstacles that she has to overcome in order to get it. And then also, Paul, what does Paul want? What is his objective? Personally for him, not for Gabriella, but for him personally. And then how do those objectives, because it seems like it ultimately is really about them, or it could be really about them. How do they find conflict, discover conflict because they have oppositional objectives? Because the super fun thing is, these great quirky experiences with Shakespeare, but what problem is that solving for Gabriella? Do you know what I mean? Like, if she wants to find a voice, what are the steps that each of those, scenes either, how do they create obstacles for her, or how do they move her step forward? So giving her that sense of activeness.
Yeah, I had a similar note. I actually like your note more than what I'm going to give you, but it's getting at the same thing. And the structure that you've chosen to write in is an episodic structure. And episodic structures are challenging because they can easily get repetitive. And that was one of the things that's one of the traps I think you might be starting to fall into a little bit is repetition. So aside from style, how do the scenes progress and change? What's different about them? And another question I had is how do these scenes affect Gabriella, and how do they change her? So she starts off in one place at the beginning of the play, you need to write this play, and I think that the arc that you want us to sort of track is she comes to a realization that her own voice is valid and important, and that she should just trust her instincts and write.
No.
I wasn't sure how these hilarious banquo scenes helped to push her in that direction. I like what you said more because it hinged a little bit more on action, and mine is a little bit less active. So whenever you can sort of think about your play in terms of action, what characters are doing, or what scenes are doing to characters, it can help to sort of activate your writing your plays and make them less episodic.
I think we all have the same note, and we're all getting at it in different ways. I wrote the same thing about how to make your protagonist stronger, like how to make her more active, and what happens if she intervenes in these scenes? What if she what if she actually takes action of some sort, trying to come up with something original, and yet always fails, or whatever it is, gets seduced by Shakespeare and ends up writing something that already exists. Or it's sort of a problem we all have about trying to be original. Very hard to do, right?
Yeah.
So, especially with Shakespeare and all these great people in our past, right? So, just to have her try to take big actions, what could she actually do that would actually add to the comedy? And a million things, like you can go wild, sort of, what could she do to Shakespeare? What could she do to the plays or the characters, sort of.
And one place where it feels like that's very specific is when Shakespeare first arrives, because he kind of happens to her. So there's a question like, can she somehow invoke him? So that she's in charge, like, I must have Shakespeare, I'm gonna sacrifice a goat, and then Shakespeare will. So then she sets up the rules, and then she can, invoke Shakespeare. And then she goes, I'm gonna light a candle and banquet, so that, she's in charge of bringing these these theater spirits, or whatever they are, into her world, in order to help her, but she does it. Or Paul does it, but then it's like, who has the agency to make the play happen?
Yeah, I mean, if I'm remembering correctly, Shakespeare is trying to lead her along to her ultimate discovery, right? That she should follow her own voice.
Yeah, he doesn't really want to spell it out for her, though. He kind of wants her to discover it through, the opposite direction. He takes her in the opposite direction. She's like, wait, this isn't right. I gotta go back to nature myself.
Okay, so that's one choice. Another choice, I'm not describing this to you, but just sort of throwing it out, is if he was more of an obstacle. So right now he's like a helper, he's a helping character, but an easy way to get conflict is if you have two characters that want opposing things and they're both going at it, they're both going in an active way, or they're taking action to sort of achieve their objective. So if she wants to do X, Shakespeare wants her to do Y, then you suddenly have a collision there of characters. So that could be potentially another way to activate your play if you're looking for, And I was curious too, what about Shakespeare do you guys really respond to? You said that that was part of your impulse. What about his writing, or about what we think we know about him, do you find compelling?
It's really beautiful, and I think it's taken for granted a lot today because, well, not in this kind of community, but in our high schools, where people just have to read through it and then discard it, and it's not really relatable to, high schoolers think it's not really relatable to them, when all of these stories can be relatable, very relatable, like Romeo and Juliet, like first love and heartbreak, and all of that's very relatable. And we really love that kind of stuff, and no one else does.
I was actually on the plane yesterday from Texas. I sat next to a guy. We got talking about Shakespeare and how our first exposure to Shakespeare frequently in an English class where you have to sit there and read it. It makes you want to throw up and just let me leave the room. And it skews your perspective to Shakespeare for years. It takes forever to recover from a bad Shakespeare exposure. And it feels like that maybe that's part of, if that's your love, if that's where you guys respond to, if you really think that it's a gorgeous, meaningful story and relevant, is maybe that's sorry, I can never keep everybody's characters straight. Gabriella, right? Maybe that's her explicit journey too. Maybe she went into calculus because she had a bad Shakespeare experience. She's like, God, that's awful. I would rather be doing Trey than reading Shakespeare. So, but then for whatever reason, she has to go back and reinvestigate it. But I think that your investment in the material, in the original source material, is really profound. Finding a way to put yourselves and your emotions about it on the page like that is really great.
Just one last thought about that. All the things that you just articulated about Shakespeare aren't, I mean, I completely agree that they're all in his place, but they're not specific necessarily to Shakespeare. They're kind of universal themes, which is why it still resonates with us now, like several hundred years later. So I wonder if there's something in that you could mine. Like, I'm guessing that both of you, like, y'all don't write in like Shakespearean verse and like, just naturally, most of us don't. So if you have a contemporary character who's a reflection of yourself, writing in her contemporary idiom, or her, with her language, and then Shakespeare comes in and he's got this heightened language thing going on, there might be some conflict and contrast there. If he's pushing her to go to this heightened language that she just doesn't sit with her, but ultimately we find out at the end they're actually both going after the same thing, which is beauty, love, I mean, all those sort of overarching themes. So maybe, I mean, I'm just throwing out another suggestion, take it or leave it, but maybe it's a play about transforming Shakespeare, about changing his perception, him seeing, oh, there's actually beauty in Maury Povich, or there's profound, I don't know, I'll find Macbeth within Maury Povich, or something ridiculous like that, but that might be another possibility, just in terms of trying to find ways to really heighten the difference between those two characters and get them in collision with each other.
Do you have any questions for us? Or?
Have y'all heard this piece out loud?
Yeah, we read through it in our theater class a few times, and we're actually considering producing it for a one-act next year, and we would probably do it.
That would be great.
Super. And would you be in it too, or would you just?
We'd probably just direct. There's a lot of people who are very adequate to do these, more than adequate to do.
It seems like you work well together. That's always valuable. If you find a collaborator you like to work with, continue on.
Awesome.
Well, congratulations. We have a workshop on Saturday at 9 o'clock and another one at 1, so we encourage you to come. And please bring your script if you do, because we're going to be doing script stuff. And these forms will be available